We're back.
Welcome to the burning platform.
Hello, Leto. I'm very excited today. Leo's here with us, and we're dialing down. Actually, we're going to dial down the pace on the burning platform. We've got Leo's joining us now, and later we'll have Peter Strydom joining us just to talk about his experience in Japan. But Leto, welcome. Is your connection good now? No. And Leto needs no introduction here. He needs no introduction here with us, but I think he's having connection problems. Will you check in on him? Is somebody going to check in on him? Because he did send me a message saying one. And he's got a couple of things on his mind. But Bhagavantu?
I want to hear Leo's views. I always enjoy his point of view. I think he's like, for someone, he balances serious and a very interesting take very well. He's very engaging.
And there's a lot happening in South African politics. There's a lot happening in South African politics today. There's a lot happening in South African politics over the past week. Peter's ready, so let's put Peter on while Bhagavantu. Just so you know, Peter, I'm so excited to have you here. And for our guests, I want you to know that Peter Strydom is a fantastic man and a great South African. He's now living in Japan. He's the president of Amway, one of the biggest network marketing companies in the world, and he's built an illustrative career in that business. He was in South Africa as the general manager for Amway South Africa, was the MD in Europe, and now he is in Japan and the president of Amway. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Phumi. Nice to be on your show. Thank you for having me. So konnichiwa, everybody. Greetings from Tokyo.
When I woke up at 4 this morning, I was so excited to see your message because I wasn't sure if you're going to be able to make it. First off, how are you doing and how far are you from the earthquake site? I know it was felt as far away as Tokyo, they said in the news.
Yeah. No, it was bad. I mean, we got woken up around about midnight, alarms went off and stuff like that. And it kind of shook for quite a while. I think it was around about 2 minutes. And I woke up and then I went back to sleep. When I woke up this morning, I had all these messages on my phone saying, what happened? And did you see it? Did you feel it? And is everybody okay? And everything. I'm thinking, oh shit, I was just sleeping through the whole thing. And but yeah, it was bad. There was, I think, a 30 centimeter tsunami, something like that, in Fukushima. All the power was out in Yokohama, just which is about less than an hour drive from Tokyo. And and there was even a bullet train that got derailed. Like, so 17 carriages, all 17 carriages got derailed. Nobody was injured.
Wow.
I was taking a walk down the road a moment ago to grab some lunch, and it's business as usual kind of thing.
So you say it's business as usual. And I was thinking about this, that if you live in a place that is prone to earthquakes as much as Japan is, what is the psyche like? So you're from South Africa. In South Africa, we were talking about it as a great place, except for the crime that we live in, which South Africans have kind of normalized, right? We've accepted we live in a crime-ridden country. Is that how earthquakes are too for the Japanese or for expats living in Japan? It's just like, this is something we've got to live with.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I think that it is normalized. I was sitting at the kitchen counter the other day on a call like this, talking to somebody, and I had my glass of wine kind of out of sight, of course, so nobody can see it. And on the side like that, and the whole room started shaking. We've got one of these lamps that has this kind of like, I don't know, it's like a big steel thing that hangs. And it's always like my earthquake kind of meter, because it starts bouncing up and down like this if there's an earthquake. And that thing started going crazy. And I kind of leant over, I grabbed my glass of wine so it didn't fall over.
Priorities, eh?
Yeah, right, exactly. But heck, the first year or two, I mean, we used to crap ourselves every time it happened. It was terrible. But then again, the other side of it is, I mean, there's so many protocols in place for when something does happen. Here at our work, we go through regular drills so that we know there's radios that you have. There's a process that you have to follow. Yeah, no, it's all very, very, hey, this is Japan. everything's very, very organized.
Yeah, Japan is
You
efficient.
don't have to, when it happens.
Everything is very efficient. Trust the Japanese.
Jeez.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it is crazy. And, so the reason why I asked you to come on the show is we often on the show because it's the burning platform, all the burning issues, but we're also always looking at it. We're so close to everything all the time. And I really wanted to know, just for you from over there far away, you obviously still have family here, I think, and you still look in our direction. You look backwards in our direction every now and again. What is the view of the world, or from Japan's point of view, of South Africa and all of the shenanigans that are happening here?
That's a big question, Phumi.
I
I mean,
know.
and to speak on behalf of Japanese, I guess that's difficult to generalize, right? But from my own experience, when I came here, my experience was people didn't really have an opinion about South Africa. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. It's so far away. We stuck here in Asia, in the middle of the Pacific, and I think if for some reason, well, for obvious reasons, I guess, the Rugby World Cup in 2015 changed that, because we had just arrived here and we got invited to, as it happens, to the ambassador's residence, which is right next to our apartment block, to watch the rugby game, right?
As it happens.
I must tell you about the South African ambassador's residence. I hope he's not listening. He'll ride me over in his motorcade if he hears.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the point is like suddenly Japan played South Africa in rugby.
Didn't sign an NDA?
And they won. The Japanese team beat South Africa. It was huge. And so we watched the game there. I'll never forget, because there was half the crowd was Japanese. We were like these newbie kind of gaijin South Africans watching the rugby game. South Africa gets beat badly. It's 2:00 in the morning. You've got half the crowd with painted white and red eating boerewors with chopsticks. I kid you not.
Wow.
They were braaiing in the garden, and people were eating boerewors with chopsticks. I'll never forget it. And anyway, and from that day, suddenly South Africa was on the radar, kind of in people's minds. So whenever I spoke to people about, I'm from South Africa or whatever, immediately it went to rugby. And immediately this big, fat, cheesy grin came on people's faces. They just loved the fact that they won, right? And that got rubbed in for 4 years.
Jeez.
But yeah, no, I think people have this overwhelming sense of curiosity about South Africa. It's a big unknown. I do a lot of public speaking, and I tell you what, I often ask the question, hey, have any of you been to South Africa? Nobody.
Wow.
Generally nobody. So people don't really have an opinion. And so like rugby's a touch point. I think this recent, the affairs that are happening in Ukraine and Russia are now a political touch point, because people are saying, hey, WTF, where does South Africa stand in all this? And so, yeah, I'd say it's very, very curious. In contrast to where we were living before in Germany, where people have a very positive impression of South Africa. Germans love South Africans, or shall I say Southern Africans, because they tend to conflate Namibia and South Africa. Kind of, exactly. You get it. So, but it's very, very different depending on where you go.
And speaking of Ukraine, I mean, President Zelensky yesterday, the Ukrainian president, actually in his plea to President Joe Biden, likened what's happening in Europe, in Ukraine, to Pearl Harbor, which I was just like, whoa, dog, that's if you ever want to pull the heartstrings of Americans, Pearl Harbor is a big thing, which got me thinking about, I wonder where Japan stands.
He didn't just go Pearl Harbor, though.
No, he did not.
But he didn't just go about Pearl Harbor. He went on about, he quoted 9/11. He did, I have a dream. And then he's like, I have a need. It was
he laid it on thick.
But but what is the Japanese? Yeah, he laid it on thick. Like he pulled on all the American heartstrings, and like everyone in Congress.
Pearl Harbor was a big turning point in World War II. Because it's the thing that pulled America. America wasn't going to the war. It's the thing that pulled America into the World War.
Yeah, like America was not in.
So what's the stance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right. Zelensky did the full-on, to Biden, pack your bags, you're going on a guilt trip type of thing. I mean, this was like he laid it on thick. But Japan, yeah, it was fascinating. So Japan has basically put their flag in the ground. They said, look, we can't countenance what's happening in the Ukraine. We're going to side on the side of humanity, I guess. And they've been very openly rejected what Putin is doing in Russia, and to the extent that just anecdotally here, tweets from the Russian embassy about Japan have been very kind of scathing and snarky and kind of the Japanese are just Western puppets, all that kind of stuff.
Really?
Yeah. So, but the Japanese are all in with the Ukrainians, and most recently they've opened their doors to. They don't call them refugees because that's a politically loaded thing here, but they call them evacuees. And so they've already accepted. I don't know. It's like 47 or 50 have already come to Japan. We've made ourselves open to our staff members in the Ukraine. If they want to come make a life here in Japan, we will set it up for them. It's a stretch, though. I mean, you want to go from Ukraine all the way halfway around the world to Japan. It's a tough one. But hey, I think it demonstrates a generosity of spirit that I think characterizes the Japanese.
For sure. And I think just saying you've opened it up for your people who work with Amway. Let's talk a little bit about building a career in a foreign country. A lot of South Africans, unfortunately, are looking abroad because of all the internal turmoil we have. A lot of people are looking abroad, moving from the country, trying to make a life somewhere else. For people, for you, you've lived in Germany, which I think Germany is not as different as from South Africa. Japan is a completely different way of life, different culture, very far away. What does it take? What does it take to make it in a career in a foreign land?
I think it's different making it in a foreign land and making it in Japan. Japan has some unique nuances and idiosyncrasies that demand, I think, more from people. We have it's common knowledge here in Japan that expat CEOs that come here, they either succeed well or they fail spectacularly. There's nothing kind of in between. And I think the people that succeed are the people that learn to work with the culture and not against it. They tend to approach the culture with humility and respect and realize that we are visitors here. And we're not here to turn people away around to our way of thinking. I think the people that try and do that, oh my God, and I've seen it, the country, the culture will just break them. And so to the extent that, when I started out, my first assignment overseas was in Spain, lived there for a while, and then went to Germany and stuff like that. But I started off very, very arrogant. I thought I knew everything, and it's a South African trait. I've learned that people tend to be outspoken. We have a comfort with profanity, all that type of stuff, and we speak our mind, and it doesn't really work. People don't appreciate it, and I think I've had a lot of that stuffing knocked out of me over the years, and I think I learned a lot of humility over the time, and say, look, you've got to respect people and where they're coming from, and maybe I don't know everything. And 9 times out of 10, you don't.
But South Africans have an incredible work ethic. Almost everyone I talk to who's international and works with South Africans, South Africans have an incredible work ethic when people move overseas. And I've also just wondering, for people who have aspirations to succeed in a different environment, what are some of the things what are some of the South Africanness that we can take with us into the international environment that can sort of guarantee that we succeed?
I think South Africans are fearless. I really think we're fearless. I think we're incredibly brave. And I don't think we have, too many sacred cows. I think that bravery, that open-mindedness coming from where we come from, this huge, it's a complex environment that we are born into, and that's our culture, and has so many facets to it. I think that makes us adaptable. And so I don't know about work ethic. I'm actually a lazy bugger.
So you say.
I,
Yeah.
I'm,
No,
I'm
no.
lazy. I like to work smart, not work so hard. But I have heard that. I have heard that South Africans work really hard. And I think it's probably because they need to make it work, and they make it work. Probably the same as immigrants in South Africa coming from other parts of Africa work hard, right? They've got to make it work. I don't think it's much different from that.
Mm, mm. Bakabantu, I think he's stuck. Do you have questions? Okay, I think he's stuck.
He's
But
stuck.
Peter, he is.
This is while he hasn't got his finger in his nose or something like that. That would be terrible.
Embarrassing me. But what about talent? Does talent count for anything?
Yes. Yes, I think talent counts for a lot. As in anything, I mean, work ethic plays a role. Talent plays a role. Bravery plays a role. And I think just an open-mindedness plays a role. For example, go to another country, learn the language. It's an essential thing. And I think South Africans are generally willing to do that. The ones, at least, that I've encountered, in my travels.
So one of our listeners here is asking a question, and I didn't know this, about the Russian-Japan contest on the islands north of Hokkaido. Do you know
Yes.
about this?
Yeah, there's 4 little, I wouldn't even call them islands. I'd call them rocky outcrops that are just north. What you don't realize is Hokkaido and the Russian mainland is like a 1 hour
Like Canada.
flight. It's like super close, right? It's like right
Like
there.
Canada and Russia.
Yeah, kind of thing. It's like the Bering Strait. It's the same thing. And so there's these 4 little islands that had long been disputed as Japanese territory, and the Russians contest that. And so there's this argument. It's been going on for ages. Shinzo Abe, the previous prime minister, made it a central piece of his foreign policy. He didn't get anywhere with it, by the way. And I think that's probably back in the limelight now, although I think the last thing Russia's got in its mind are those 4 little rocks sticking out the sea. But then, who knows?
Yeah, if they really do have what the West fears, is Russia having quite kind of ambitions of taking over, like they did with Crimea, that nobody said anything about. There might be something there, which would be, fascinating, because again, World War II, Japan was on the other side of that war.
Yeah, and it's interesting. If you look at post-war Japan, I mean, it's very much a product of its relationship with the United States. I mean, very, very much. I mean, they absolutely bonded together over that time. So, you tend to find that foreign policy and trade very, very oriented towards the United States. I mean, for example, you won't find an Airbus airplane here in Japan. It's
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And just in terms of, you touch on trade, how much trade does Japan, if any, does Japan ever do with South Africa? I mean, I know we're a speck.
I had this conversation with the trade representative it was a couple of years ago, and I actually can't remember offhand. It's not substantial. It's I don't want to say it's not substantial. So let me leave it there. I don't want to quote a number, whatever, but it's not very, very big.
Are there opportunities for South Africans in Japan?
For South Africans, right now, there's not a lot of opportunity for any foreigners. The borders are still closed to foreign business travel. So I'm trying to get expats to come and work here. We can't get them in. They're not issuing visas to anybody. So the borders have remained closed because of this bloody coronavirus pandemic. So you guys were complaining early on about the state of disaster. Well, we're still in a state of emergency over here. It's coming to an end next week, but they've closed the borders for ages. It's kind of like back to the 1850s, whenever it was, when they, Japan had been closed. Japan was closed to the world for 200 years.
Yeah.
Or more. I need to be corrected on that, but it's a long, long time. And then they opened to trade in the mid 1800s. And it's kind of like this last year and a half, 2 years, it's kind of returned to that. It's kind of shut the borders down. The foreigners will bring the virus kind of feeling, and only now they're starting to talk about opening the borders again and starting to bring limited number of people in. So, I would say that, yes, there's opportunities for South Africans, but at the moment, there aren't any opportunities for anyone. There are still, by the way, there's still 150,000 eligible foreign students that want to work and study in Japan, that have been approved to study in Japan, that can't get in. 150,000.
Wow. Okay, that is a significant number. Well, you bring up the coronavirus, and I've been reading a lot about the resurgence in the East. Kind of China's having a resurgence, and they're struggling with it. I think I even saw something about America with the resurgence of like corona and a feared new strain and another wave and all of that kind of stuff. What has the coronavirus experience 2 years on been like in Japan?
It's been horrible. For me, it's been crap. It's they've had these rolling states of emergency, not the kind of lockdown you had in South Africa, by the way. It's, legally they cannot do that, but they closed restaurants at certain time. You couldn't drink alcohol. It was all that fun stuff. But it's not like you had to stay in your home and you couldn't leave. It wasn't like that. Not like you had police, patrolling the streets. But the Japanese are very, I'm generalizing here, very obedient. So
compliant.
They're very compliant. So if the government says don't do this, generally 90% of people don't do it. But the economy's been hit. Restaurants have been hit. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Roppongi. Last night I was having a drink with him. I mean, for 2 years he's had maybe 20% occupancy at the hotel. So it's been hard, and the governments had been having to fork out these subsidies to small restaurant owners and all that type of thing. People flying in have to go through, until recently, hotel quarantine, like government hotel quarantine, and stay there. So those hotels have been getting subsidized by people like us that are traveling in Africa and stay there. Awful experience, by the way, absolutely horrible. But and so God willing, it all just gets finished and we can get on with our lives. But I fear that there's going to be another wave, and there's going to be another knee-jerk reaction, and so we go.
And do you miss anything about home?
Oh my God, yes, of course I miss a lot. I haven't been home for 3 years now, because we did a year before the pandemic. We were seeing family in Durban and Cape Town, and we said, what, this next summer this next Christmas we're gonna spend in Japan. And then the pandemic hit, so we haven't been home for 3 years now. I miss standing around the bar, having a beer. Miss just being able to communicate with people. Here you can't. I mean, I always say South Africa is the land of the corny joke. We always making jokes with each other and talking shit with each other, and kind of revving each other. It's kind of part of the way we communicate with each other. And the more you give somebody a hard time, it means the more you like them, kind of thing, right? Well, here that doesn't work at all. Firstly, you've got to be able to communicate properly in Japanese. And then small talk is not really a thing that, you don't stand in the cashier line in the shopping center and start talking to somebody. It's like everybody kind of keeps to themselves. I miss the social connection that we have with our people. There's nothing that'll ever replace that.
Sure, that is quite something, I think, because we often think, oh, it's always better far away. You know, it's
Right.
always better. You get away from all of the stuff here. And I was saying to the guys earlier, I feel a lot like as South Africans, we're in such a traumatized state right now. We do quite a lot of navel gazing, right? Everything is so loud and so close. It's the ANC, it's Kalniaus, it's this, every single day, it's murders, it's robberies, it's everything is so close and so loud that we kind of don't have a chance to look back and say, you know, what are the things that do work and what are the things that I can do to better the situation, to, you know, because we can't just sit here and be afraid. We need to.
Yeah. It's true. It's true that, you know, if there's one thing that really aggravates me when I go home, it's the degree to which people are so negative. There's this endless complaining about the crime and the this and the that. And it's like, it's not all better on the other side of the fence. You know, you've got corruption. Come to Japan. It's as corrupt as anything.
Okay, you got
I
to
mean,
tell me a little bit more about that. I saw a billboard in India a billboard where Modi is on the billboard, and basically the message of the billboard is, if you're going to be corrupt, guys, just also do your job. You can't be corrupt, just also do your job. I was just like, what fuckery is this? I mean,
no,
on a billboard. So tell me a little bit about Japanese corruption. I'd love to hear.
it's corrupt. No, I mean, we'll put it this way: the government, the ruling party, a lot in Japan, the LDP has been in power for, well, since the Second World War. It's been the same party. It hasn't changed. Yes, there are elections and everything like that. So very conservative, the LDP, and they've been in power forever. And you know, if you look at the history of the formation of the LDP here, there were links to organized crime, there were links to the security apparatus in the United States and so on. So it was formed, but that's what it's been. So it's kind of, and you know, you and I well know that any government that is in place for an extended period of time is just, it lends itself to corruption, right? It goes in that direction. So there was one simple story that illustrates this is that during the initial phases of the pandemic, the government went on a kind of a communication blitz where they were going to tell people, you know, that they had to, you know, wear masks, they had to be careful, they had to wash their hands, and all that type of thing, and how people were going to be compensated if they closed the restaurants, everything like that. I'm going to get some of the details wrong, but the principle is the same. So the government granted not millions, billions of dollars to this campaign. The campaign went to the national broadcaster and the biggest advertising agency here in Japan. And but get this, the intermediary was a small little shop over a ramen eatery somewhere, and all the billions of dollars went through there. They skimmed off like a big nice chunk, have a nice day, and then the rest got passed on to the ad agency. Just one illustration. So the point is,
so they have their own Zwelimkhize. Is that what you're saying?
yes, and they don't muck around, man. They do it big, you know, go big or go home. So yeah,
But does it bother the people if everything works? I think the view that we have over here is that the reason it bothers us so much is because nothing works. You know, the hospitals
Right.
don't work, the school system doesn't work, nothing. There's potholes on the road. That's what bothers us. Does it bother the Japanese because everything works?
You know, that's a great observation. You know, I in general, I don't think it bothers them too much. So, you know, you and I, when we look at what's happening in South Africa, get filled with righteous indignation because of the fact that everything's flipping broken. But here it works very, very well. So yeah, I think you're right. It does tend to make people a lot more tolerant or willing to turn a blind eye.
Because I really do feel that way. I think the thing that you say, righteous indignation, I think the anger really is when you have to sit in a hospital all day and there's just so much inefficiency, and then there aren't enough doctors. There was a story last week which is horrifying that there was no bread at Baragwanath Hospital. It's, the biggest hospital in Africa, and there was no bread. All of that is what drives us all crazy. If everything worked, I think people kind of, when there's money in the bank, when people are working, all of that kind of stuff, then people kind of look away from it. What's the unemployment like in Japan? Is there any unemployment?
It's very, very low single digits. There is practically no unemployment. So for every job, you've got more jobs than applicants in general, right? So that's not a problem. And the whole societal structure is geared towards looking after people. It's caring for society. So the government's role, and they overreach here big time, by the way. Don't get me going. But is to protect the consumer, protect old people, help them, make sure everybody's educated, all that type of stuff. So it's very much caring for every single layer of society as far as possible, and everybody's got a role to play. There's this whole idea of, it gives rise to this whole idea of harmony in society, and anything that breaks that harmony is really frowned upon. They often use the analogy in Japan of the nail. You don't want to be the nail that sticks up, because the hammer will come and hammer it down. So everything's kind of the same. So yes, to a certain extent, it might give rise to a certain degree of mediocrity, but it's very safe, it's very predictable, it's very organized, and it doesn't give rise to this, the righteous indignation which we were talking about earlier on.
Peter, Japan is also a very homogeneous society. Everybody's Japanese. South Africa, on the other hand, has a melting pot of lots of different types of people. In your experience, do you think the homogeny of the culture in Japan also makes it easier for the tolerance, for the harmonious way of living that we don't experience so much here?
Yeah, I guess so. I think that would be true. I mean, it is very homogenous. We did that ancestry DNA test a while ago, right? And it's fascinating. I mean, I'm like a total fruit salad. I mean, DNA fruit salad. And but if you test anyone here in Japan, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be 100% Japanese, 100%. And
imagine,
and so yes, and it makes people very proud of their culture, and people that don't fit that mold tend to be excluded. So for example, if you've got, they call them hafu. A hafu is a half Japanese, half something else. So
hafu. That sounds like a Zulu word.
Hafu. Really? It's called half. No, so you call it hafu. And anyway, if you're hafu, it's like you're kind of like a second-class citizen. It's like
sure.
It's very, very clear. It's kind of weird, but it's there. So you can call it racism, you call it bias, you call all of this type of thing, but that exists. That exists very strongly. And a mate of mine said to me, he's been living here in Japan for, I don't know, 40, 50 years. He's an old guy. And he said, "Hey, Peter, you're going to try and integrate into Japan, right?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm going to try. I'm learning my Japanese. I'm doing all that stuff." He says, "Don't bother. You will never, ever be integrated." And it doesn't mean it's not bad. It just is, right? It's not a judgment thing. It's just is what it is.
That's what it is. You got to recognize it.
Yeah, it's fun.
So I did ask Bagabantu, who seems to be having a lot of like coming in and out, because I was just like, Bagabantu is an intern here, and I thought this is international exposure for you, Bagabantu.
I already met Peter Phumi actually earlier. I met him. I'm the one who set him up.
I'm very proud of you for doing that. Thank you so much. But do you have a question, Bagabantu, before I ask?
Oh no, I have a question and a couple of comments. Okay, number one, Peter. Comment number one. I am disappointed that you do not have a samurai sword in your background.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, I'll work on that.
We're waiting for your questions.
So no. My question is, in terms of the coronavirus, my entire exposure from that side was, it was from the, sorry, technical issues, but yeah,
No worries.
it was from wrestling. Funny enough, I follow.
We just lost your voice.
We can't hear you. While they sort out their technical issues, I'm going to ask you this question. Yes, you're back.
Okay, yeah. So like in terms of like, I think their state of disaster in terms of like the impact on the economy, I thought it was worse in Japan because I watched it live, like with a promotion called New Japan Pro Wrestling, because I'm a wrestling fan, and like they literally shut it down during the COVID like pandemic, and then they still paid everyone because like with the Japanese honor system and whatnot, like people honor in front of business and whatnot. I respected that, but like that was a huge impact on the promotion, like in terms of like from a business point of view, it was like really bad and damaging. So I wanted to see like the impact on like just normal day businesses in Japan, like that surely like that culture of putting people first and whatnot had an impact on businesses and like on the ground level in Japan.
Huge impact. I mean, if you're a small restaurant owner that you make ramen every day, you've got a hand to mouth existence. Commuter traffic dried up overnight, so you don't have a business anymore. Hotels got decimated. The tourism industry decimated. So the retail sector really hard hit. So you take a city like Tokyo. The retail sector and the restaurant industry rely on tons of commuter traffic. I mean, you've got millions of people commuting into Tokyo every day and then leaving, millions. And so they've got to eat inside the city. All of that dried up. Give you an example of scale. The one station in Tokyo, the Shinjuku station, is one of the largest in the world. It takes around about 3.5 million passengers per day. That's more than the whole population of Washington, D.C. That's one station. So that stuff dried up. So people were hurting. And so, yes, they got some government subsidies, but it went nowhere near, making up for where they were before. And it's still not back yet. I mean, I was walking through Shibuya, where our office is here, and at lunchtime, and it was busy-ish, but normally it would be a crush of people. But it was kind of, looked over my shoulder, walked across the road kind of thing. It's kind of like sparse. And the traditional views of Tokyo, you've got that crossing. There's like a crossing that everybody crosses like at the same time.
Like that's big crowd, yeah.
That's kind of just down here. It's not so busy anymore. Whereas, for us, we're an e-commerce business. And so, our business barely got dented. So we were fine.
Wow.
But you in retail, you got a shop, you got a restaurant, you in the all that other stuff. You were hurting badly.
Yeah, because
I was going to ask you about the business.
Yeah, like that's what I noticed from like a business point of view. I'm like, I think in South Africa we had it bad, but like watching it like in Japan and also like the cultural differences and like the people, they had like a great response to it. It was overreaching to a certain point. It was like very like shut down, almost like China levels of lockdown. But it was like, I was just wondering on a day-to-day basis, it like Tokyo must have just went quiet, which is like for a city that never sleeps, must have been weird.
It was eerie. The first lockdown was like that. I mean, everybody stayed at home. You walk down the middle of the street in Ginza or Shibuya, these huge high rises, and the streets are like ghost town. It was kind of weird. I mean, we saw all those pictures, right? New York, Manhattan, all the cities, Paris, Rome, all of them. It was like that. But I think when we got to the second, third, and fourth lockdown, I think people said, screw it, man. I need to get on with my life. And so it kind of pragmatic behavior kind of crept back in. But it's still not back at the level it was, pre-pandemic, I have to say.
So Leto is still having problems reaching us, but he's got a question, Peter, and his question is a little bit like my view on the homogeny. Is he wants to know if does it feel different, this government overreach and the fact and the way that the government is, because there is a cultural philosophy of compliance we spoke about before, and a kind of soul understanding of the way things are versus how South Africans, every one of us, have absolutely different departure points for how we view what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable, what is not, what is overreach, too much and too little. Does that play a role?
Well, I tell you what, you want to see overreach? Come here. I mean, I don't think that this government in South Africa is anywhere near what you experience here. I heard Japan described the other day as a police state with a smile, and it's kind of put it this way: more than 97% of prosecutions in Japan are successful. So the prosecution rate is going to be 97 to 99% successful. So this whole system is designed to successfully prosecute people.
We need to send Shamila Batoyi over there for some lessons.
So you get caught up in the legal system here, and it's you got trouble. So we all know the Carlos Ghosn case. I mean, he had to escape in a music box and all that sort of fun stuff. But in one sense, there's truth to it. He knew he wasn't going to get a fair trial. But so how do people feel about that overreach? I think it's kind of accepted. I think there's this general feeling that, we know that the system is a little bit rigged, but it's rigged to protect me. It's rigged to protect me from, predatory behavior of multinationals, of, scam artists, whatever the case may be. It's designed to protect me. So I think it's generally acceptable.
So no Tokyo swindlers.
That's my opinion. That's just my opinion.
No Tokyo swindlers over there.
No, like from a point of view. No, I was saying like from a point of view of like from being a South African and not trusting the government, like that must be like really like different. Like where you like in Japan, like everyone trusts everyone. Like it's a pretty trusting society.
It is pretty trusting. I still don't trust the bloody government though. Genuine don't. But yeah, it's kind of a change, I guess. That the cynicism which we have, with which we view kind of authority or government and stuff like that, I would say is a very Western construct, in my opinion, at least. You won't find that in Japan. You won't find it in China for sure. Maybe in Korea. Koreans are very, very, outspoken, and stuff like that. They're also very, very divided, between the conservatives.
Well, I was going to ask you about the relationship between Japan and South Korea, because we know the relationship between Japan and North Korea. What is that relationship like? I mean,
Well, there's history there. I mean, I'm a bad person to ask this. There's people here that could answer this here much better than I can. But there's history there. So there's
deep history of colonialism.
Deep history of where Japan colonized Korea, and a lot of bad stuff happened there. So
and America
a good illustration of this. I brought an expat from Korea into a management position here in Japan, and it was a disaster. It was a total disaster. I mean, it didn't work on a number of levels. Culturally, the Koreans tend to be very, let's go for it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Go, and very demanding. Whereas here, it's very measured. Get it perfect, all that type of thing. And then you factor in the Japanese Korean history, and it was one of my mistakes I made, shall I say.
Jeez. But generally, the relationship between the two countries now?
It's tense. There's a thing, I probably shouldn't go into it too much, but there's a thing with when this happened, the Japanese took comfort women from Korea and have never apologized for it, and still haven't apologized for it. And so this goes on and on. Every year it's like a thing. And there's always this tension. There's this sense of Japan hasn't properly atoned for its sins, back in the day, and that leads to a lot of political tension.
What could South Africa learn from Japan?
Efficiency.
Oh,
Oh,
I did that, didn't I?
oh, well, you've been in
A
Japan too
lot.
long.
I think a lot. I think the Japanese could learn a lot from South Africans, not to be so compliant, and to be more questioning and critical. I think that's one thing that Japanese can learn from South Africans. I think that the South Africans could learn something from the Japanese in terms of making a society work. There's a focus on education, educating your kids, making sure that they go through that process. And, I know you guys were talking about this early on, but really it isn't about teaching you to do stuff. It's teaching you how to think and think for yourself and think critically and all that type of thing. They care for their old people. They really care for their old people. And it's an aging society, so they have to. And so there's this sense of societal responsibility that I think, for all its faults, for all its overreach, I think is praiseworthy in many respects.
It's an aging society, you say, and this is a problem in the East. And I think Japan, probably China has a lot more of it, but Japan is also in that space where there are lots more old people than young people, and it's a precarious place to be in for a country and for an economy. How are they dealing with that?
Phumi, a great question. They're dealing with it badly. Yes, it's the fastest aging population relatively in the world. So we've turned the corner. The population's going down now at speed, and it's picking up pace. China's still got to turn the corner, but it's inevitable. They'll turn the corner soon, but they're not there yet. Japan's turned the corner, they're going down. So Japan are looking to robotics to fill the gap. So, certain medical care, things like that. So they're looking to fill the gap with technology, basically. They have still maintained a very, very strict view on immigration. It's very hard to immigrate into Japan. And I think ultimately immigration...
They're going to have to open up.
You're going to have to. I mean, that's the answer to anything. You've got to have people. And yes, they're not going to be genetically pure anymore. Literally. That's okay. That's okay.
Genetically pure.
Oh, that statement.
Call it what it is.
It's loaded.
But it's the truth.
Is that important to the Japanese, this genetic purity? So
Yes.
there's not a lot of interracial. And when I say interracial, I mean Japanese white. Doesn't necessarily have to be Japanese black, but Japanese and other.
I've seen both, and so it exists. I mean, and it's great, but it's still, I'd say it's rare. It's rare. I think there's a tendency to prefer homogeneity than variety, shall I say? And I think so. In that respect, I think Japan's got a long way to go. They really do.
There's a certain snobbery in that kind of looking for that kind of purity, isn't there?
That's true.
And I'm wondering what kind of problems that raises. I think about if I think about the Jewish society here in South Africa, that's so small and therefore also has peculiarities because of their not having enough genetic diversity, right? Does Japan have any kind of those kind of peculiarities that don't exist anywhere else in the world?
You mean relating to its homogeneity?
Yeah, it's genetics. Do you know? You wouldn't know.
To me, like anyone that is an international citizen, people are people. I can't see that there's any advantage or disadvantage. I just think it's people, and I think it is an element of snobbery. And I'm generalizing horribly here. I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody. These are very general kind of.
This is we absolutely here at Cliff Central completely understand that these are your personal views. They're not the views of your company or your spouse.
I see there's some chats. There are some idiosyncrasies in some of those areas. The porn industry, I guess. I don't know. No, I'm reading your comments. It's kind of, there's some interesting stuff coming up there.
No, but in terms of the genetics and like how they're so interested in like your purity and whatnot. Like Peter kind of mentioned something like a word that he just dropped by, like is like gaijin. Like there's words like that. Where in South Africa, like calling someone a foreigner, it's not a nice thing. It is what it is, but like it's really not a nice thing. But like again, Japanese being blunt and precise, you're a gaijin, and you can't grow your way out of that. You can't integrate yourself. You can speak fluent Japanese. There'll always be that cultural barrier that you're a gaijin.
Yes, I think that you've summed it up perfectly. You'll always be a gaijin, and I'll refer to myself as a gaijin, as do all my colleagues in the same boat, and we get referred to that way. And
referred to that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
To your face.
Yes. No problem. And it's not, I don't take it as a derogatory thing. I think it does have certain overtones to it, but I think it's a descriptor. It's like you're not Japanese, you a foreigner, you somebody else. And there's, if you go to Germany, you're an Ausländer, you're an outlander. And so it's the same thing. If you go to Spain, you're an extranjero. So there's words in all these cultures for these things. You just got to roll with it.
Jeez.
But Japan is the dreamland, Peter. Like it is like the dreamland. I would want to go to Japan, just like on the culture point of view. Like somebody in the comments talked about, like in Japan you can buy an iPhone from a vending machine.
You can buy a lot from a vending machine.
You can buy a lot from a vending machine. I've heard like the weirdest stories, like how people buy like,
yes,
I can say this. You can buy girls' panties from a vending machine.
I've heard that. I've never seen that vending machine. Not that I would want to buy anything from it. I'm just saying.
Oh, are you looking, Peter?
But you can buy a lot of stuff out of a vending machine. That's true. And get this: the vending machines are never vandalized, ever. They are. Everybody respects. Imagine having all the vending machines in South Africa. It'd be a hoot. It'd be a spectator sport. But it would be wonderful to bring you here to Japan and host you sometime and go see some wrestling, some sumo. My wife is a huge sumo wrestling fan.
Wow.
And so maybe next time.
I just want to say about sumo wrestling, and which is one of my favorite things about the idea, because everybody looks at sumo wrestlers and they're like so big and so everything, and people are all trying to have like a six-pack. Just know that the core strength of a sumo wrestler is very severe, much higher than that of some gym buddy with the six-pack. Just know.
They are. I agree with you, Phumi. They are super, super, super strong and super flexible, and the whole tradition around it, the theater. It's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Makes me feel better. Those sumo wrestlers and knowing about their core strength makes me feel better about my mkaba here.
Oh, great.
Peter, this is wonderful. I am so delighted you were able to join us. I really am. And this conversation for me has been very enlightening. And now because of the comment here about porn, the Japanese porn industry, I can see myself going into a black hole on the internet now, trying to figure out what's happening there.
There's certain things you don't have to research. I think this is one of them.
But A
Don't
fascinating
Google
thing
it.
to know.
But like, don't Google it, this movie. Like, stick to anime and yeah. And also,
It
there is
was
a fun industry
wonderful.
around that.
So, and how do we say thank you in Japanese?
Arigato gozaimasu.
Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you
That's
very
it.
much.
Perfect.
Siyabonga kakhulu. Siyabonga kakhulu. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. And thank you for
Lovely.
coming on and shuffling your day. And even in the midst of an earthquake, indulging us
No,
with this conversation. You were magnificent.
it's been an absolute privilege to talk to you all both, and wonderful to be connecting to my country people. And yeah, wishing you a wonderful day. And thank you very, very much for having me. Dou itashimashite.
Thank you and goodbye.
And I think that brings us up to just on 2 minutes before the show ends.
Yeah,
And it's been absolutely fantastic. Vagabantu, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was lovely
I did
having
this for
the
me.
bank here.
I'm definitely back next week.
I hope next week. We got let down by because of the Com Air saga. The person we had lined up for today got caught up in the Com Air saga and the flights and the this and the this, and so he's going to be joining us next week. I'm also excited about that conversation. Join us, Bakabantu, if you can. And to all the listeners, I'm so grateful that you stayed with us for the entire 2 hours. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Peter as much as we did. And we will see you next week. Peace out.
Thank you very much. Peace out.